Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of The Longing. Today we are once again going to be continuing to read Homer's Iliad. So, let's get going. He spoke and ardent on the trembling ground, sprung from his car, his ringing arms resound. Dire was the clang and dreadful from afar, of armed Tydides rushing to the war. As when the winds, ascending by degrees, 138, first move the whitening surface of the seas. The billows float in order to the shore, the wave behind rolls on the wave before, till with the growing storm the deeps arise, foam o'er the rocks and thunder to the skies. So to the fight and the thick battalions throng, shields urged on shields, and men drove men along. Sedate and silent move the numerous bands, no sound, no whisper, but the chief's commands. Those only heard with awe the rest obey, as if some god had snatched their voice away. Not so the Trojans from their host ascends, a general shout that all the region rends. As when the fleecy flocks unnumbered stand, in wealthy folds and wait the milker's hand. The hollow vales incessant bleating fills, the lambs reply from all the neighbouring hills. Such clamours rose from various nations round, mixed was the murmur and confused the sound. Each host now joins, and each a god inspires. These Mars incites, and those Minerva fires. Pale flight around and dreadful terror reign, and discord raging bathes the purple plain. Discord, dire sister of the slaughtering power, small at her birth, but rising every hour. While scarce the skies her horrid head can bound, she stalks on earth and shakes the world around. 139. The nations bleed where'er her steps she turns. The groan still deepens, and the combat burns. Now shield, with helmet closed. To armour, lance to lance opposed. Host against host with shadowy squadrons drew. The sounding darts in iron tempests flew. Victors and vanquished joined promiscuous cries, and shrilling shouts and dying groans arise. With streaming blood the slippery fields are dyed, and slaughtered heroes swell the dreadful tide. As torrents roll increased by numerous rills, with rage impetuous, down their echoing hills, rush to the vales and poured along the plain, roar through 1,000 channels to the main. The distant shepherd trembling hears the sound, so mix both hosts, and so their cries rebound. The bold Antilochus the slaughter led, the first who struck a valiant Trojan dead. At great Echepolus the lance arrives, raised his high crest, and through his helmet drives. Warmed in the brain the brazen weapon lies, and shades eternal settle o'er his eyes. So sinks a tower that long assaults had stood, of force and fire, its walls besmeared with blood. Him the bold leader of the Abantian throng, 140, seized to despoil, and dragged the corpse along. But while he strove to tug the inserted dart, Agenor's javelin reached the hero's heart. His flank unguarded by his ample shield, amidst the lance he falls and spurns the field. The nerves unbraced support his limbs no more, the soul comes floating in a tide of gore. Trojans and Greeks now gather round the slain, the war renews, the warriors bleed again. As o'er their prey rapacious wolves engage, man dies on man, and all is blood and rage. In blooming youth fair Simoisius fell, sent by great Ajax to the shades of hell. Fair Simoisius, whom his mother bore, amid the flocks on silver Simois' shore. the nymph descending from the hills of Ide, to seek her parents on his flowery side, brought forth the babe their common care and joy, and thence from Simois named the lovely boy. Short was his date by dreadful Ajax slain, he falls and renders all their cares in vain. So falls a poplar that in watery ground raised high the head, with stately branches crowned. Felled by some artist with his shining steel, to shape the circle of the bending wheel. Cut down it lies, tall, smooth, and largely spread, with all its beauteous honours on its head. There left a subject to the wind and rain, and scorched by suns, it withers on the plain. Thus pierced by Ajax, Simoisius lies, stretched on the shore, and thus neglected dies. At Ajax Antiphus his javelin threw, the pointed lance with erring fury flew, and Leucus, loved by wise Ulysses, slew. He drops the corpse of Simoisius slain, and sinks a breathless carcase on the plain. This saw Ulysses, and with grief enraged, strode where the foremost of the foes engaged. Armed with his spear he mediates the wound, in act to throw, but cautious looked around. Struck at his sight the Trojans backward drew, and trembling heard the javelin as it flew. A chief stood nigh, who from Abydos came. Old Priam's son, Democune was his name. The weapon entered close above his ear, cold through his temples glides the whizzing spear. 141. With piercing shrieks the youth resigns his breath, his eyeballs darken with the shades of death. Ponderous he falls, his clanging arms resound, and his broad buckler rings against the ground. Seized with affright the boldest foes appear, e'en godlike Hector seems himself to fear. Slow he gave way, the rest tumultuous fled, the Greeks with shouts press on, and spoil the dead. But Phoebus now from Ilion's towering height shines forth revealed, and animates the fight. Trojans, be bold, and force with force oppose, your foaming steeds urge headlong on the foes. Nor are their bodies rocks, nor ribbed with steel, your weapons enter, and your strokes they feel. Have ye forgot what seemed your dread before? The great, the fierce Achilles fights no more. Apollo thus from Ilion's lofty towers, arrayed in terrors, roused the Trojan powers. While war's fierce goddess fires the Grecian foe, and shouts and thunders in the fields below. Then great Diores fell by doom divine, in vain his valour an illustrious line. A broken rock the force of Pyrrhus threw, who from cold Cneus led the Thracian crew. 142. Full on his ankle dropped the ponderous stone, burst the strong nerves, and crashed the solid bone. Supine he tumbles on the crimson sands, before his helpless friends and native bands, and spreads for aid his unavailing hands. The foe rushed furious, as he pants for breath, and through his navel drove the pointed death. His gushing entrails smoked upon the ground, and the warm life came issuing from the wound. His lance bold Thoas at the conqueror sent, deep in his breast above the pap it went. Amid the lungs was fixed the winged wood, and quivering in his heaving bosom stood, till from the dying chief approaching near, the Catolian warrior tugged his weighty spear. Then sudden waved his flaming falchion round, and gashed his belly with a ghastly wound. The corpse now breathless on the bloody plain, to spoil his arms the victor strove in vain. The Thracian bands against the victor pressed, a grove of lances glittered at his breast. Stern Thoas, glaring with revengeful eyes, in sullen fury slowly quits the prize. And with that, we've pretty much come to the end of the episode. Which means we are done with reading for the day. We're getting ever closer to the 400 days, but as I've said before, we're not going to be ending it at 400 days. We're going to keep going a while longer. I'd like to read as many of these books as possible, though I may wake the king and continue to read if it will allow me to once I've finished a few more books. So I may pick and choose which books I do in the future. Or I might put it up to a poll, actually. I might put it up to a poll to see which ones you want me to read. So, but that is for future. So for now, I'll say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night, no matter what time of day it is. I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we'll be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.